Oi, it's me again. Yeah, you know how it is. I go back and forth on uploading to this channel now. Kinda like how I go back and forth entering your mother's bedroom. Anyways, enough of this laughing matter. Let's get straight into it and on to more pressing matters, shall we? Specifically, why you even clicked on this video. This being that the topic for discussion for it will be the recently released Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime, which was based and set in the same universe as the popular 2020 action-adventure role-playing video game, Cyberpunk 2077, by developer CD Projekt Red. If the spoiler warning at the beginning wasn't enough for you, then I'll once again warn you that I'm gonna be talking about this show thoroughly. So if you still haven't seen it, well, you snooze you lose, I guess? Now, some of you may already know developer CD Projekt Red via their works on the Witcher video games, with the third installment, Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt, being one of the most acclaimed video games of all time. It reminds me that just like their Witcher games, we shouldn't forget that the Cyberpunk universe Projekt Red has tackled is not their own, as the franchise actually belongs to, dare I say, one of the godfathers of the cyberpunk genre, Mike Pondsmith. Not to be confused with the cyberpunk genre, Pondsmith is known for creating his IP with the same name as the genre, which was originally a tabletop role-playing game dating back to the 80s. Pondsmith's most obvious inspiration for creating his game originated from the original Blade Runner film directed by Ridley Scott, with his goal being to mimic the cyberpunk genre's use of mixing advanced technology with dystopian ideologies of government corruption, poverty, drug abuse, crime, and etc. The same can be said for its more recent installment in the form of the game developed by Projekt Red, with Pondsmith being a consultant in keeping the video game consistent with its original tabletop game's lore. Now, much like its predecessor, 2077 turned out to be well received in the world building department, ultimately successfully expanding upon the foundation Pondsmith's creation was built on. And also likely because they managed to get Keanu Reeves for a leading role in the form of a rebel rocker boy. So of course, Reddit instantly went crazy over it.
I need your body, I'll fucking...
I don't want to bring up the game's troublesome development and controversy surrounding both technical issues and false promises, as that's not what I'm interested in covering in the video. Rather, I am more invested in just how Projekt Red successfully managed to take their video game property and continue on to make an extremely accurate and faithful television adaptation. It's also important to note that Edgerunners was animated in collaboration with Studio Trigger, a renowned Japanese animation studio known for their work on popular productions like Kill la Kill, Darling in the Franxx, Little Witch Academia, Promare, and Star Wars Visions. It's important to note that many of their productions happen to be original works, and thus were less restrictive in what they were able to do. Edgerunners, on the other hand, is a story put right in the middle of an already existing and almost 4-decade-long story, meaning by definition it is a video game adaptation. And naturally, with that title comes quite a bit of baggage. That is, that it exists in a landscape with an ever-growing and overflowing amount of shit video game adaptations. However, this ain't one of them, baby, because this show is so fucking good! I'm gonna quickly summarize the world Edgerunners is set in, because otherwise we could be here all day trying to piece together every single important moment it has to both the tabletop game and the video game. In short, it takes place before the events of the video game and is a completely standalone story when compared to that game, yet exists within the same world, meaning it too takes place in the vast futuristic metropolis known as Night City, a fictional city set in between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Much like the game, it's a dystopian future where poverty is at an all-time high, and crime only keeps increasing whilst its political and corporate leaders fail to properly acknowledge these faults, and instead only focus on their own sustainability. This leads to a world addicted to commercialization and monetization of even the most basic human needs, such as healthcare. It is a world where most of its people, poor or rich, turn to the use of cybernetic implementations to enhance their minds and bodies in order to not fall behind its tech-addicted culture. Yet obviously, this too has its drawbacks, as it often leads to those who severely rely on these augmentations to become mentally ill with a condition known as cyberpsychosis, a condition heavily tackled within Edgerunners. Speaking of Edgerunners, it follows a poverty-stricken teenager named David Martinez who lives with his financially struggling paramedic mother in Night City. David is seen to be an extremely troubled kid, often being unable to fit in at his prestigious school, which his mother is seen to be struggling to even pay for. After almost being expelled due to his constant failings at school, David and his mother are caught in the crossfire between gang and corpo, and end up in a car crash, and after a bad back and forth of David trying to recuperate from this moment by going about his everyday life again, his mother ends up succumbing to the injuries she got from the crash, and David is left alone to fend for himself in the cruel, grueling, and selfish world of Night City. To say Edgerunners' world is unfair would be a disservice, as the game it is based on tackles the theme of living on borrowed time, accepting one's own mortality, and weighing one's value. As stated before, this is an extremely faithful adaptation of the game, with it using various places from it as the basis on which its characters interact. You can visit every single one of these places yourself within the game. A dare I say almost completely never done before method of interactive storytelling for anime at such a grand scale. Furthermore, its subject matter is extremely unconventional, especially for a studio like Trigger, which are often known for their overly bombastic and unrealistic premises. Now don't get me wrong, Edgerunners is bombastic and a bit unrealistic, but the more you think about it, the more you notice it's a very different work for this studio to tackle, lacking the stereotypical fan service and instead only using sexuality as a benefactor to the franchise's emphasis on commercializing sex. Unlike Kill la Kill, which is just straight up porn, it lacks characters purposefully done to checkmark an existing stereotype into the story, and instead focuses on having characters that don't have nosebleeds whenever they see a naked body, as even though David Martinez himself may be going through puberty, he treats the liberty of nudity as an adult due to him having to quickly grow up and live amongst other adults. But just because most of the characters are shown to be comfortable in their physical chrome-coated skin, doesn't mean they're comfortable mentally. The entire cast of Edgerunners is soon exposed to be a deeply insecure and unstable bunch of people. The video game has its cast act very similarly, in the sense that its writing is considered strong through its use of containing characters that are never able to truly reveal their entire motivations, backstories, and or intentions. Both the show and the game contain people trapped in a world that caused them to trap themselves. Such a universal character trait is echoed via a line in Edgerunners.
Ain't no one in this world you can trust more than yourself.
It is a heartbreaking quote that is ever so supported through the show's main cast that joins David in his journey in the form of their own tragic backstories and fates. None are able to escape their past mistakes, wants, and aspirations because it either ends up consuming them or their life is cut short. It makes me realize that this cyberpunk world is not Ghost in the Shell. It is not Blade Runner. It does not contain primary themes around finding one's humanity or finding one's identity through an ever-flowing amount of numerical data. Rather, it is a journey of different kinds of people trying to prove to themselves that they have the right to live in a world that doesn't care about them. Much like characters of the Shakespearean quality in which characters' external/internal conflicts break them and justice is elsewhere, Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk uses postmodern topics around inevitable shifts in cultural, political, and ideological landscapes to reflect similar stories to that of Shakespearean tragedies. This is because I believe Shakespeare's way of writing in tragedy for his characters is very similar to someone like David Martinez's story, as it is the stone that shines the brightest in this department by having him have an arc that doesn't better him and instead degrades him. Ironic, since this is something most associate with a villain arc rather than a hero, yet also always forget that it is also ubiquitous to someone like Shakespeare's characters such as Othello and Hamlet. Therefore, it is not the fact that the show has a sad ending that has given it its almost universal acclaim from critics and casual audiences alike, but rather because it tells a narrative that respects those who do not succeed in their endeavors. I felt like condensing both the quality of the animation and the potential of expanding this IP into other forms of media works best, because this is an incredible stepping stone for what can further become of stories within this universe. This can be seen through the various videos posted to market the release of the anime. It's clear that both CD Projekt Red and Studio Trigger work together like butter on bread, constantly being aware of each other's strengths, and both showing a respect for each other's field of expertise. It appears that much of this comes from the veteran experience of various staff at Trigger, such as character designer Yo Yoshinari and directors Hiroyuki Imaishi and Hiromi Wakabayashi, all three of whom originally worked under Studio Gainax on things such as Gurren Lagann and Neon Genesis Evangelion before going on to join Trigger itself. It pleased me to no extent that they took heavy inspiration for characters like Lucy from Ghost in the Shell, because it shows a care for the genre's roots. They also bothered to ask Projekt Red to gain special access in order to free roam the game in order to fully visualize Night City as accurately as possible. This is actually extremely difficult due to them both being in different mediums. One medium is not just a television series, but a very specific format of 2D animation, and the other is a fully fledged 3D action-adventure video game with dozens of hours of existing content. Yet somehow they pulled it off, in the form of constant nods to the game, such as sound effects, music tracks, user interfaces, and as stated before, locations that were directly taken from the game. Moreover, the art style for which Trigger is so well known for actually ended up being a perfect choice for a show in this setting, although I would say I first struggled with their style for this show, due to the increasingly large number of cuts for specific action scenes, as well as some scenes being set during an overly bright daytime. This combination of daytime and high-octane action led to the jumps between the movements to lose my gaze, and thus led me to struggle to pinpoint where exactly I was supposed to be looking at and hampered with continuity. However, this issue soon resolved itself by the show primarily taking place at night and in dimly lit environments, in turn permitting the neon-stricken streets and electronic signs of Night City to always illuminate the characters' silhouettes and instantly make them recognizable. When a room was particularly dark, the lights of various devices allocated within the room helped set the atmosphere for what is occurring within said room. In addition, characters were made instantly recognizable via Trigger's notable use of having each of them vary in physical size and shape. Not a single character in sight looked the same, and not a single design looked reused. From clothing to hairstyle, each character's wardrobe reflected a lot of their personality. It's something I think a studio like Trigger has mastered, and it's clear that they keep on evolving this talent with every product they make. Lastly, I can't forget to bring up the fight scenes, and action set pieces altogether, because it very much shines a light on what I believe the game severely lacked, this being a variety in the show's cyberware, something Pondsmith's original vision heavily focused on. The video games ended up containing only a very select amount of cyberware that both visually and physically affected how its protagonist functioned, in both gameplay and narrative. Edgerunners, on the other hand, expanded upon this roster by using both familiar and unfamiliar weapons, gadgets, and techniques from the game, to help further give life to the characters and their stories. In conclusion, I believe that Cyberpunk Edgerunners has successfully built upon its source material's deeply complex and crude world. It's made all the more positive via it being an anime and permitting much of its medium style to work together with a video game to make an instant classic within the entire cyberpunk genre. This show is but a stepping stone for what else is possible within such a franchise, because I hope CD Projekt Red and Mike Pondsmith continue on to produce various other projects within the cyberpunk world, as it's a perfect personification of why the genre is so revered in the first place. Nonetheless, I believe that is all for this video. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.